Welcome everybody to our session today. We're going to start on time and about an 82% chance we'll end on time. So that's pretty good odds.
Current temperature.
I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Andrew Hairston. He's a very difficult person to introduce simply because he has done so much and been so much. I was introducing him to one of my friends, Captain David Bynum, who's a chaplain in the Navy stationed in the Pentagon, and I, by the way, told him to get that mess straightened up out there. So he's working on that, finding out that he is a retired colonel and chaplain in the Army. And you're a jurist, you're a judge, you're a preacher for 54 years.
Whoa.
At one church.
Yeah, that's the whoa.
Anybody want to trump that? His lovely wife Jeannie is not able to be with him, but Dr. Hairston we got a wonderful family as well, and Pam and I have been to his congregation several times at Simpson Street here downtown Atlanta. With pride, he always says the only Church of Christ that's still around in downtown Atlanta. And our time is divided into two parts. Today I want to interview Dr. Hairston a little bit, get him to talk about what's happened since the 1960s in Churches of Christ from his perspective. And tomorrow we'll pick up where we left off, or approximately where the president is, and do a little projecting and get him to do some projecting for us. The good thing about it, Andy, is tomorrow, when we talk about what's ahead for the next 25 years, you and I will not be around for it, so it doesn't matter what we say.
You'll see if we can talk to the chaplain and give us more time.
Yeah, we may could use some prophecy tomorrow, so hang around, chaplain. Come on in, just find a seat on the steps or whatever, just don't tell the fire marshal. Andy, I would like to start out by getting you to talk about what happened in the 60s, and we're talking about what happened in Churches of Christ, and so I'm aware that there was a big meeting in Atlanta. I wasn't part of that, but I know that you were and some others were. So that will be as good a place as any to start. And tell us your perspective of what was going on then, and let's work our way up to now, and I'll ask you some questions along the way here.
10 thanks and I appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to be here. I'm glad the Lord has preserved me for this moment. It's a wonderful institution, and what ACU tries to do, and is trying to do, and trying to reach out and be all inclusive, and for all the world, not simply for the Churches of Christ.
By the way, I forgot one important thing. Andy has an honorary doctorate from ACU, so he is an alum.
I finally got to graduate from ACU. Before the meeting in Atlanta, which was attended by significant people of the Churches of Christ, matter of fact, had a couple of the Highland here, elder, was at that meeting.
Art Haddix, yeah.
Cliff Gainers, then president of
Harding.
Harding, Arkansas. John Allen, Walter Birch, Prentice Meadows, and that was the second meeting that was held in the Church of Christ. I know anything more than major meetings. A lot of times, a number of small meetings going on. But the first one was held at the Schrader Lane Church of Christ, where David Jones ministered. He's been very out in the field too for a long time, and has done a wonderful work. We were glad to gather in Atlanta for that meeting, and the condition then was next to no participation in action of any significant size in Churches of Christ in the race relation area. Now, it's always been visitations. I'm fortunately and unfortunately in terms of my time passing, age I well remember, I came out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, out in the country from there, and we would go to white churches, and when meetings were run, they would come over with us, etc. So you always had some interaction between the churches, but there was no thought of being members of each other's churches. And I would say we're not far removed from that now. You have a few places, have a few blacks going, but rarely do you see, like in Atlanta, a white church, white people integrating the black church. Integration is, that's the reason I call it efforts at assimilation, not integration. Because in my mind, integration really takes place when you have free flow, and I don't have to say that's a white church, that's a black church. Even if they end up all white, all black, yet they're still wide open. And that's a feat to really accomplish, which means there's got to be a lot of participation on both sides. Now, we have moved in, at various times in distinct ways, trying to address that problem, and it's a difficult problem to address. And not trying to show balance, but both sides have to get something done to make that a reality. And so that's where we were, and we are not too far removed from that now. There's greater ease in participation and visitation, etc. And nobody's shocked now, and nobody particularly stands out when we come together like we are now. But integration really lies beyond that. It's a far more important goal to accomplish, and we'll talk about that more as we go along.
Okay, I have read somewhere or heard you say that you don't even use the word reconciliation.
Okay. And
Because
this is going to be a good session.
we're going to get you in here in a minute. Because you have to have conciliation before you can have reconciliation,
Yes,
right?
That's right. And it's looked at commonly that you can't reconcile anything that has not first been one. The races have never really been one, so you can't reconcile them. You make people deal with the issue of that. And a number of blacks strenuously object to that concept. It announces that you're starting from a level that didn't exist.
So that's a big deal.
Yes.
So if we drop the reconciliation language, what's a good term to put in its place? What is actually happening? Is unity more toward the idea you're talking about? Is it unity in Christ we're after? One in Christ?
I would find that concept to be acceptable, and of course, explanation has to go along with people who used to using the word reconciliation as to a replacement of that idea. But the aim is focusing on Christ and our becoming one in Christ. As Paul said, we are all one in Christ, rather than people who are different. When we lose a separate identity when we come to Christ.
What happened back to that 1968 meeting? What happened after that meeting?
Well, we continue to have separate meetings, different meetings at different places, and a lot of lyrics were contacting, and a tremendous and important relationships came out of that. I met John Allen Chalk in person, in Prentice Meadows, and all of us became real great friends, and there was an openness we could really talk about the situation and feel that we weren't condemning each other, etc. And the Allen Chalk and Prentice Meadows and those guys just benefited, I think, a lot of ways from having one-on-one conversation. I remember I was talking to them in Dallas. We came into Dallas for some reason, and we looked at the barbershop over there. And conversation moved. I said, now, you know, I can't get no haircut over there. You guys can. He said, you got to be kidding, Danny. I said, oh. One of them actually got, no, he wouldn't cut my hair. The levels where segregation existed that they were not even remotely aware of, and showed the depth of the problem. So we built those kind of relationships, and I became a rather regular speaker for the campus evangelism.
Yes.
I was very active in that.
Yeah.
And that was across the board, and we moved together every year. So good things came out of that. I'm glad you raised that point. Good things came out of that because we need to see that we were not out there accomplishing nothing, and that things were gradually changing and getting better.
Yeah, was Fred Gray part of that regional group in the late 60s or not?
Fred Gray was at a higher level and almost in the bag by himself, because as far as integration was concerned, because he was with the boycotts and all of that kind of thing. But he was able to make a great contribution, and he happened to have been a personal friend of mine, and he's my mentor as I'm going into law. So he was there, but he's there in a different way. And Fred felt that he was never really a part of the marching even, and he felt that one person cannot do everything. Somebody got to do the legal thing, so he put all his time in that.
Okay. That introduces an interesting idea, and that is that I'm hearing you say there's not one single approach to this, but it's very multifaceted. And,
Yes, sir.
And talk a little bit more about, you can go the legal route, the legislative route, I guess integration at the congregational level. That one is probably was the most difficult to develop, if at all, during those
Yeah,
times.
you can go the route that Jerry Taylor has, that we're working with still, making an approach to it, because one of the great things come out of that is that these people get to live and talk together, etc.
Yeah.
Social route more or less.
Okay, after the 60s, then was there any other formal meeting that took place in the 70s or the 80s, or was it more individual or small groups merging out of that?
I think I don't remember another meeting as such like the 68 and the one with David Jones had, but I think we were invited, blacks were invited more, or groups more, where we were invited in to speak and to converse, etc., and raise issues. I spoke on a number of campuses, etc. Others did the same thing, and there's a lot of people acting everywhere. Those folks, most of them are still alive and actively engaged.
I would say one approach that has taken place, and you've seen this in Atlanta, where it's in a sense kind of a two-edged sword kind of thing. You have increased integration, but it's primarily in the suburbs, and the migration is blacks going to predominantly white churches rather than the reverse. I've heard you talk about that before, but talk a little bit more about that. Why do you think that's the case, or is that all bad, or just kind of a mixed bag?
I don't know that I'd put in either one in either one of those
Okay.
cases. It's a multiplicity of things. The first place, I think we have to realize that whites have a culture, they seem to think, that is distinct with them. And racial integration is also cultural integration. It's a linguistic integration. It's an intellectual, social. And if you notice, blacks move into white congregations and adapt. I've had a number of times where whites will come to my congregation and they leave after a period of time. What is the reason behind that? We also have a problem that blacks congregations that grow disgruntled and dissatisfied because they're not participants in the leadership and choices of the black church and guiding them. They go to a white church and sit down and don't do anything and buy into it and consider themselves advanced. And because of what race has done to us, it really has made us think that the white system and whites are better than blacks. We have a joke that we use in the black community, some of you may have heard and some may have not, that the ice you buy from white people is colder than that. And now that's a realistic joke at the bottom. But what the racism and culturalism has done to us blacks and all blacks, it's made us think, and it always puts the other race up we're at the bottom trying to get up here. Whites are not up here trying to get out here. And that means that you have to come up to what these folk think, how they feel about things. And these folk don't necessarily find any real value in what these folk think down here. So it's an accommodation thing that also has to be attacked. So I've said to people that the process that we see of blacks moving into white churches is going to dissipate the black church. It's going to make the black church pay from both ends. Our good friend preaches in Decatur, Alabama, Harold Gilmore. Some of you might know Harold. He had a teacher in his church, and he's very active in this area. And she came along and got to be Teacher of the Year in Decatur. The next year she moved to a white church. And Harold hadn't gotten over that yet. And the process is that only primarily the people who go into the white churches are your more qualified blacks. And that means you're dissipating the black church, because whites generally don't move into black churches, regardless of how you do it. And so if the white church is ciphering off of the black churches, leaving the black church, going to the white, you're more competent people. All you have is a bunch of incompetence over here. Now, we in ministry pay a terrible debt for that. Because one of our problems in developing and moving the black church is to have, you need competent people. And it's very hard for me to teach my brethren that if you get where you can do something than quote Acts 2:38, you need to stay here so I'll have some strong people to work with. You can't communicate and handle a church if you don't have anybody to communicate advanced ideas. You can't play calculus on somebody 6 years old. So you got to have people who you can deal who understand. But many of my brethren, I've had them leave me, right? And I had one not too long ago. Kind of looking at the possibility that one day I may die.
I don't know. You're a pretty good case for immortality.
One day I may die and have him there to take the church over. Yeah. Well, he had an opportunity in another church. He left. And I preached.
So now you got to live some more.
And it happens to you repeatedly, over and over again. But so while I'm at that, I would say I think that whites who are definitely interested in blacks who are definitely interested need to look at what they're going to have to do if they go into those churches. Why do black people survive more? And you may have different theories, because we're used to suffering. You have to remember that. That's a part of our ethos. It's back there. We can live in discomfort and be happy. People who have never had to live in discomfort are very unhappy. So blacks are more used to people rejecting them in church and otherwise. And so they're not training us to go into white churches, but at least you've been trained to find alternatives of existence when you're over in the white church and the whites don't want you. And I've had some 2 or 3 cases where, because I'm seriously developing a downtown church in Atlanta. We're the only downtown church in Atlanta. We're the oldest African American church in Atlanta. We're the second oldest African American church, second one to whom Keeble preached the gospel. He preached the gospel in Valdosta, like in 30, and baptized, and he came on up to Atlanta. That year he preached and baptized 166 folk. Came back the next year after that and baptized 264. And that's the Simpson Street Church Christ. We're nowhere near that size now, because our people leave and go to suburban churches. So it's something, if you're going to really approach that issue, you got to look at all of his angles, all of his assets, all of his defects, and what you have to go through. And I don't have an experience that as a black man. I experience it just a person growing up out of poverty. The more we're able to adjust to circumstances where we are and go forward in spite of it, the more successful we're going to be.
So part of the part of the white problem is buying into the cultural, secular value of success orientation.
Oh, yeah.
That your worth is estimated by your success or by your station in life, so to speak. And so you've got a false goal out there, and we become victims of our own goals that way.
Yeah, I would think that's correct, and it's something I thought about this morning. I was a Baptist preacher. I said, God told me this morning.
We'll give you a pass on that one.
But there's another side to that. A lot of times in my working with whites and blacks, we fail to recognize from which we've come, and that we are successors to people who are successful and people who have been punished or have not been punished. And the pastor came to me, sending the oppression upon the third and the fourth generation of them that hate me. Mm-hmm. And it hit me that from that I have to realize that I'm the son of a slave somewhere down there. And what they did in that is being relived in me every day. The punishment that my ancestors took continues to drift down. And the white race have to understand that they are the ones, they are the successors of the one who put the pressure on. And sometimes we forget that because we want to say, well, that was our great grandfathers did that to you. But the whites are beneficiaries of that oppression that they did to blacks. And therefore, when they're dealing with the blacks or any other group for integration, they have to remember that succession. Mm-hmm. And that never hit me before this morning. I knew it was there, but that passage made it quite clear to me that it descends, it goes down. And if the wealth of the United States, slaves were used to build it, and it benefited the whites.
Well, we have an idea, I think in America, that it's here now, that was then, this is right. Now, that kind of thing. But it is a stark fact of history that what happened 250 years ago, 300 years ago, affects the political view, let's just take that, of everybody in this room, in terms of freedom, if you don't believe this, come at 8:30 in the morning to hear Igor Egarev, the Russian guy, talk about what's happened the last 250 years in his culture, and it profoundly affects his view of life and even liberty. So here's a typical thing. If you respond to this, we're going to throw it open to these folks who I'm sure have plenty of questions for you. This has been my...
For us.
Us, yeah. Well, yeah. You keep reminding me that I'm in this soup with you. Here's a typical a reaction of typical predominantly white church leaders. Somebody proposes that we do a series on race relations or unity. When we say unity in Christ, a lot of times first thing that comes to our mind is treating the Baptists and the Methodists nice, where unity in the New Testament is a profoundly ethnic implication. I mean, a Jew and Gentile, that kind of mutual contempt almost puts in the shade what the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. But here's the typical response. We need to do a series on race relations, and then somebody inevitably says, no, we don't have racial prejudice anymore. We have civil rights legislation now, and so we don't want to talk about that. Now that is typical. I'll speak because I've been on the giving and the receiving end of some of those comments, and it's almost like the whites want to bury this and get on. Do you sense that? The whites want to almost bury it and get on. And the black leaders are saying, wait a minute, it's not that simple, it's not that easy. but it seems to be where we kind of spin out. And I've often hoped for moments like this where we could just kind of get together and where our mutual love and affection and a sense of brotherhood is a given. That's not what is a threat. But to say, what can we do to pierce that, sometimes it's called white privilege, which is by and large unconscious.
Oh, yeah. You've been trained to think that way.
It's by and large unconscious, and if you don't believe it, let's go down to my bank and I'll try to get a loan and you try to get a loan. Let's see who gets the most money. You want to do that after this is over? You have to pay it back. But does that make any sense? Isn't that what we're fighting? There's an unconscious, at the unconscious cultural level, on the part of everybody, there's something at work here that keeps getting us off track.
No, I definitely think that is a problem. I think that's a problem. And let me say this before I go further. I think that each of us, and I'm not fighting for balance in this thing. It's out there. It's got to be dealt with. That's how I feel. Have to be ready to be at fault, to be found wrong. And that's hard for us to accept. I know that when I'm told to my wife. But I made a statement, I think it was at Lipscomb, and I think one of the guys didn't like it too well. When you talk about doing something about the racial problem and changing it, you got to change everybody. Everybody got to experience change wherever he or she finds he or she crosses the line. And I made the statement that when you look at us and the efforts we try to integrate, who is asked to change in our system? Blacks are asked to change. Look out, brothers, I'm coming. Women are asked to change. White women are asked to change. Black women are asked to change. The white male is not necessarily challenged to change. Now, you take time to think about that. Don't get mad at me. Don't waste your time getting angry, because I tell my church all the time, that doesn't change nothing. But basically, the way it's presented, the white male is presented as the perfection. Everybody changes for him. And he's the cause behind it.
So, how do you reverse that?
Well, number one, the white male needs to realize that change cannot be made without his participating in the change.
Okay.
He's a part of the humanity. He's got to do the same thing when he comes to Christ that I have, that my wife has. And I don't think that as an aggravation, but when you look at the whole thing, for some reason, he seems to be held out there unconsciously as an idol of perfection. And all of us know that's not true, but yet we're trapped by it. And I don't have an answer to that. But I think it's the thing we really got to look at. Who is at fault? And the fact that my ancestors did this, or succumbed, however it was, that's just not, we're on a new day that's requiring things of us that we never had to give up. And the next generation is really teaching that in a lot of ways. So I'd like to point that up. Now, next, the thing about the past, that happened in the past, that's a part you're not going to get in the grave. That's my ancestors did that, and that's a historical fact. A part of it still hanging out of the grave.
Lives on in the DNA, doesn't it?
That's right. You're where you are because of what your ancestors did.
I think one of the most important things that you've said all along is that a lot of what we're dealing with is on the unconscious level, and that's the hardest, because your reason kicks in and ignores that. And so it takes a lot of hard work and painful work to figure out beneath just the conscious reaction,
Yeah.
what it is that irritates us, what it is that angers us, what kind of bias that's there. And it can be gender, it can be ethnic, it can be all kinds. It can be doctrinal, it can,
And a deeper point is we've been trained to get angry at certain things.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's unconscious, it's subconscious, and it's not dealing with a mean person. It's not dealing with somebody who hates you necessarily. It happens to all of us. I react a certain way because that's my exposure. I was born in Clemens, North Carolina, a rural country on the Yadkin River. And I've gone on and gotten education in a number of fields, but you cannot get out of me my basic racism. And my thinking flows out of that. And so it's a part of me that I don't like. So how do I deal with that? I have to deal with it, recognize it. As they say, how do you put on when you conflict? Put it on the table and look at it, admit it, and then you can deal with it.
But it's not deterministic, and it's not that
That's
you
right.
have to be that way,
That's
but
right.
you have
That's
to
right.
admit that that's part of it before you can,
And that's the mistake. We think, well, I have to be that way. I can't help myself.
yeah.
I thought I was a certain way a long time until I got married.
I'm not touching that one. Well, I think by saying that's the way, just the way I am, is a powerful denial of the gospel,
Yeah.
which is about the business of change. Let's hear from some of you. What would you like to ask?
I was present the year at the summit that Abilene made the apology, the racial apology, and as I recall, you were there too. It was dampened in its impression for me by how many years it had taken for Abilene to make that apology since the first black student was turned away because of race. And I wonder if that length of time, which was many, many years, is something that we're still dealing with as a church culture.
I call it the glacial movement of progress. It seemed like it's awfully slow. That apology came out of a reconciliation meeting that, I'll use that term again. One in Christ meeting that we had, black leaders and white leaders in churches of Christ. A few of us at least got together, and at the end of the day, after a very intense day, I said, what do we need to do? And one of the brothers here, I think it's Tony Roach here in Abilene, he said, well, you might start with an apology. And so that's, then we said, how and when do we do that? And it came out of that meeting. It was a very intense day, and so why did it not occur earlier? I don't have much of an explanation for that. I'm ashamed to tell you that it took us that long to ask what needed to be done, and that's terrible. But that's the way it was.
I think also that goes, if we have to deal with this problem this way, some people it's hard for them, and some of them never forgive. Now, we tend to think on some of these homicides, like the guy that choked to death in New York. The next day they ask his mother, can you forgive me? Et cetera and so forth. Which seems to be a password after you do something wrong. There's a lot of people in the country haven't forgiven that guy, even if his mother tried. Now, a part of this problem, racial problem or human problem, is that you're asking human to do divine things. And some of them don't even believe in him. So that's what the problem has done. It dealt us a whole nation, whole world, a bad deal. And I was at Southwestern the very night that he made that acknowledgement. And it was generally accepted, but there are people that didn't necessarily buy that. You done some damage to me, can't be straightened out. And I'm gonna remember this the rest of my life. That's how some people feel. Others do the best we can to push it past us and go in and deal with it. But then there's people on the other side don't think you'll even want to make an apology. So it's a mixed up thing. It's a terrible issue, hard to deal with. And I think I said to Brother Money and my friends, the day we've come into and the future day for the real Christian, life is changing so fast, is going to be the person who can run into issues and solve them on the spot. You got to be able to think, what does I do right? What must I do now? Since I know you feel the way you do, or you act the way you act, what can I do about that? And try to go forward. Because you wait 2 or 3 days, it's too late. Fast acting people. And the only way that can take place, I think, is you got to really have Christ a part of your system.
Yes.
And I glory in the Philippian passage of Paul that I might know him and the power of his resurrection, that I may suffer as he suffered, die as he died, and perhaps attain to the resurrection. According my thing in that passage, Paul is saying, I want to think like Christ. I want to be able to do the same thing he did. And those people can forgive you and move on, because they know you can't correct it. It's already done. You can't go back and redo it. And people that got to be of that persuasion, and that's what makes it difficult for some. Thanks for the question too.
May I say something?
Yes.
Our son was with you when you and Doug went to Southwestern. And our background is a little different. My dad was a minister, and so I grew up believing that there wasn't a difference between white and black, but I also remember the tent meetings where we sat on one side and the whites were on the other side. I remember the old songbooks that were given to us. I remember all that. But Eric grew up during a different time. And he was pleased to have the invitation to grow, but he was disturbed too after attending.
Yeah, we've got, it's all over the map. Some people said too little, too late about the apology. Others said finally, and others said, well, show me.
That's right.
Show me. And so we've made, I think, some good progress at ACU in terms of our diversity of student body. We've made lousy progress in terms of our faculty and staff balance. And so you win some areas, you fall short of others. It's a constant recalibrating. And I just know in the depths of my heart that the gospel speaks of the very thing that we're talking about here. There is a part that says, yes, I am. I'm probably the descendant of a slave owner, and he is probably
still
a
slave.
Just probably a descendant of the slave. Well,
that's a problem in itself, the fact that you can identify your source and I can't.
Yeah.
The difference in the thinking of people. I deal on that question. So
Okay.
That one.
Okay. Fundamental to our conversation is the role of the church in society. This will show, I think, some differences. What, in your opinion, Andy, since I'm asking the questions, is the proper role of the church in our society?
A very important question, and I didn't think that up. He thought that up. I believe I've spoken on the issue a number of times. Oakland last November spoke on it briefly. I think first the role of the church is to be what Christ would be doing were he on earth. It's the body of Christ. And I don't think we've taken that seriously. It's the need to be able to converse, carry on conversation with all of the world without their station in life determining that he's dealing with, our dealing with him. They have a multiplicity of locations and relationships. And that's something not easy to develop. my having been on the bench, my having been the prosecutor in the city of Atlanta for a number of years, and chaplain in the United States Army, and educated at diverse institutions, it's become quite clear to me that other people speak a language, even about Jesus Christ, that's different from ours. And that does not certify me not to talk to them. So I have to spend a lot of time trying to understand what he is saying. Again, I come back to my family, I understand it with my own wife. I'm going to say something to her, and I know she differs with me. I've got to figure me out an approach to get to her and say what I want to be said, what I want to say, with her understanding what I'm talking about. And that's difficult. Because if she's angry with me, she's frustrated, she doesn't think I ought to be doing, kind of closes down her ears. And my being angry with her dictates my conversation. So I think we've just got to spend some time on, and to me that's what Christ did. He accomplished that. And we won't be as good as he was, but we can be a lot better than we are. So I think the body of Christ must carry on conversation with all of the world. Because that's who Christ called us to save. And we don't have the privilege nor the right to eliminate anyone. And I'm not sure the Church of Jesus Christ has given a lot of consideration to living up to the Joel 28 passage, 2:28 passage that Peter quoted on the day of Pentecost. All distinctions are gone. And we still in gender arguments, we still in diverse arguments, with racial arguments, and race is the only thing God has rejected through the early church. All those distinctions that we hold against each other, we got to be able to overcome them. And I'm going to testify to you, it's a terrible thing to try to do it. It's hard to do. With my children, with my church, dissatisfied all the time. How can I preach on Sunday morning and the images emerge in their mind that I'm trying to create with my speech? And a lot of people come against me because they don't understand what I say. And they're too anxious to disagree. So they're not in a frame of mind. So we got to be in, I think that's one of the things that church, he doesn't want to monopolize, but I think that's one of the things church should really try to do. How can I communicate to these people? And if we design ourselves right, I think, and I'm still struggling with it, when we come to race, it's just a matter of that principle of Christ prevailing. Come to gender, same principle prevailing. Jesus Christ was the same before man all the time for God. It didn't make any difference whether it was Jew, Gentile, or whoever it was, Samaritan woman, or what it was. He's able to communicate with them. And they understand what he's talking about. And that's something that's not simply divine, it's human also. We can do it. I've done a heck of a better job than I did 50 years ago, 30 years ago. And so I think it's one thing we kind of miss in spending that time. That's what I think church leaders need to spend that time on. I'll say this and I'll stop. Had a lady come before the church 2 Sundays ago. I was telling Jerry about this. And here's a lady who's blind and taking care of 2 men who are sick. And she came before the church, and she had been getting help from different ones, but she came before the church and asked if the church would get somebody to help, try to help her some kind of way. She needs some help. And we left church that Sunday morning, and I called her on Tuesday and said, has anybody contacted you? She said, no, Brother Hairston, nobody talked to me. Now, if a blind lady with 2 men she's taking care of, sick, can come before church, and the leadership and everybody at that church not really go after doing something about it, we're not communicating. We're not representing Christ. And there's no way we can think the way she thinks if we leave her out there. And that's the kind of problem that that's amplification in a different way. But we do that in churches all the time.
Yes.
I'll use a well-worn statement. I know a lot of black people. and they're friends.
Okay.
But I taught at the University of North Texas for 41 years in chemistry and biochemistry. And my first graduate student was a young black man. We became very close, but I see that there are still barriers on both sides
Yeah.
to really come back to what we need to be. For example, he told me that his black friends ridiculed him, called him cracker and Oreo and all those names because he wanted to excel. He was taking his books home from high school and studying, and he had a tough thing to find. He's a very intelligent young man. He got his master's degree in my lab and went on to do what he wanted to do, and that was to become a physician. I think he lost his wife in the process. She didn't see why he was doing this. It's a barrier that prevents a lot of black people from being successful, I think, because they don't want to enter the white man's world. Do you see anything valid about that viewpoint? Or incorrect about that viewpoint?
You say they don't want to live in the white man's world?
Well, that, like in the world of learning, going to college and really studying and putting forth effort, which he did.
Yeah.
But he fought his own people in doing that.
Yeah.
Because he was submitted to ridicule and all sorts of really what I would call well, I'm not sure what I'd call it, but it was not good. And he told me about his experiences in that process.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to monopolize, but that's a thing that we blacks go through that the whites don't know we go through it, perhaps. We get labeled as Uncle Toms or this, that, and so
Yeah.
forth, and we do things that try to act with balance so he thinks he's white, et cetera.
Yeah.
All that goes on.
Because he wanted to learn, he wanted to study, he
Well,
wanted to excel.
people have various ways of dealing with rejection. And people don't like me because I got a degree. So I can speak some way that runs down the degree. It's just a multiplicity of stuff out there. That's what kind of driven me to the point of the Christian or the man of God or woman of God is going to be the person who's so much together with Christ that he can come up with solutions on the spot. Because a lot of times, it's almost stimulus and response. But it's a lot of that going on. I probably couldn't talk to a black in here or outside who has not had terrible experiences with that. Because they are against doing things what they call white.
Yeah.
So
That's a good place to, I like that idea. We need to explore some more. How in the world do you train yourself, get yourself into the situation to where you can make better judgments on the spot?
That's right.
And we'll pick up there tomorrow. Hope to see you back. It's same time tomorrow? I think it is. 1:30. All right. We are